In the last few weeks, we've seen a string of devastating events, including China's earthquake, a cyclone in Myanmar, terrorist bombings in India, and deadly tornadoes here in the U.S. Right now, tens of thousands of people are dealing with the loss of life and property from those catastrophes. Time magazine writer Amanda Ripley has traveled the world studying disasters and how people respond to them for her book, The Unthinkable. Now, that may sound like a morbid undertaking, but what she learned could help you survive should the unthinkable occur. You spoke to a lot of people who survived disasters, both natural and man-made. What did you learn about how people respond to disaster?
You know, what I learned is across very different kinds of disasters, from shipwrecks to building fires, people experience a very similar series of sensations, physical, psychological, even sociological, and they're very different from what they would have anticipated. Usually most people go through about three main phases in any kind of disaster. And the first is almost always a period of denial, where your brain will become incredibly creative in coming up with a counter-narrative to explain the very frightening cues that you're getting. And it will try to normalize that situation so that you think you kind of try to convince yourself that everything is okay. And then the next phase is deliberation, where people immediately become very, very social. We all want to talk to other people when we are in this kind of situation. Even you know, from a hurricane to a terrorist bombing, there is this instant kind of camaraderie that happens with people. And so most people, before they evacuate for a hurricane, for example, check with 5 different sources before deciding to leave. So that could be family, friends, even TV news. And then the next phase is that finally sort of taking action, which usually we do the right thing given the information we have. There is this risk of doing too little or doing nothing at all.
And you mentioned something that I found personally to be pretty scary, which is that it takes a while for help and rescue to arrive.
Right. No, in any major disaster, no matter where you are, if you are in China or Burma or the States, you are going to have 2 to 3 days at least. They're now saying 5 days in California if the big earthquake came, on your own. And so that sounds very terrifying. Now, what it actually means is you're not on your own. What it means is that your neighbors, your family, your coworkers will become an integral part of your survival, and vice versa. But it is true that you're going to need to get by on your own for at least a few days, and we should expect that, and that's certainly manageable.
Just to state the obvious, there are cases where there's nothing you can do, right? If you're killed in the initial blast of a terrorist attack, if you're caught in an awful storm with no warning, there's nothing you can do about that. But can you just give the brief bullet points of what you can do to survive if the circumstances are right?
Right. I mean, I think it's very important to point out that here in the States and in other developed nations, we have the luxury of choices. So not always, but in some situations, your behavior matters a great deal. It's important to recognize that your first instinct will be denial and to try to move through that. And then the next thing you can do is just try to realize that you do not need to be afraid of people around you, that you will be in good company almost no matter where you are in a disaster. And so your friends and neighbors, your relationships with them before the disaster will determine how helpful they are to you after the disaster.
I have to admit, it's a little depressing to think about, but it's also empowering to know that everything is not up to chance, that there are some things that you can do. Give your book plug. When does it come out?
The book comes out June 10th.
The Unthinkable by Amanda Ripley. Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much, Mara.